After years of supporting my struggling parents, I received an unexpected email from my grandmother that changed everything. She had accidentally forwarded me a thread that was never meant for my eyes, and the contents left me reeling. A month later, my parents called me, sobbing about their inability to pay their bills, but I had finally decided to stop being their financial lifeline. I replied coldly, "A few months ago, my grandmother accidentally forwarded me an email thread. It wasn't meant for me, I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did, and it changed everything." Initially, I brushed it off. My grandmother often forwarded random things, funny chain emails, bizarre medical advice, political rants, but as I scrolled through the email, my stomach dropped. It was a conversation between my parents and my grandmother. The subject line was something mundane, something I can't even recall now, because all that mattered was the content. My mother was detailing how much money I had given them over the years, and then she wrote, "He's too foolish to stop supporting us." I felt my breath hitch for a moment. I read it again and again, hoping I was misunderstanding it, that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. But then my father chimed in, "Yeah, he just hands over the money without asking questions." My mother added, "As long as we keep up the act, we're set for life." It felt like a punch to the gut. I sat there frozen, gripping my phone so tightly that my fingers ached. The people I had spent years helping, the ones I had chosen to struggle for, thought I was an idiot. No, not just an idiot, but a fool they could exploit indefinitely. I reflected on every time I had pulled out my wallet, every time I had taken on extra shifts, cut back on my own expenses, and pushed my own plans aside just so they could have what they needed. I had never questioned it because they were my parents, because I loved them, and they had been laughing at me behind my back. I don't know how long I sat there, the words blurring together. I wanted to throw up, scream, or call them right then and demand an explanation. But what could they possibly say? It was all right there in writing, I was too foolish to stop. Okay, I would prove them wrong. Growing up, my parents were a mess with money. They weren't poor, not really, both had jobs and at times made decent money. But they spent it the moment it hit their bank accounts, fancy dinners, new cars, random gadgets, and who knows what else. They never planned for the future, never saved, and certainly never thought about consequences. This meant that when something went wrong, and something always went wrong, it was a crisis every single time. The car broke down? Emergency. The mortgage was late? Emergency. A surprise medical bill? The end of the world. And every time, they had the same solution, me. It started when I was in college, with small things at first. "We're just a little short on rent, we'll pay you back next month." They never did. "The car needs a repair, we'll pay you back in a few weeks." That money never came back either. By the time I graduated and landed a steady job, I had unknowingly become their backup bank account. They never even asked how I was doing financially, they just called, listed their problems, and waited for me to fix them. And I did, because I thought I was being a good son, because I thought this was normal even when it meant putting off my own goals, saving for a house, going on trips, or even getting a better car. I told myself it was okay because they were my parents, because they had done so much for me when I was younger. It never even occurred to me that they weren't just bad with money, they were using me, and I had been letting them until I saw that email. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying every moment over and over again, every phone call, every excuse, every tearful apology from my mother when she needed just one more loan. It was all a game to them, they had never intended to stop, and they had never felt bad about it. I thought about confronting them, but what would that accomplish? They would just deny it, turn it back on me, and make me feel guilty. I could already hear my mother's voice in my head, gasping, "How could you think that about us?" No, I wouldn't fight them, I would just stop playing. The first time my mom called after I saw the email, I answered as if nothing was wrong. She started with small talk, the usual fake warmth, before sliding into what she really wanted. They were short on cash, the electric bill was due. Could I send over a few hundred? I let her talk, I knew why she was calling. Finally, she sighed deeply, her voice heavy with concern. "Your mother told me everything." I didn't respond. "She's heartbroken," my grandmother continued. I let out a short laugh. "She really said that?" Yes, my grandmother replied sharply. And frankly, I don't understand what's gotten into you. Of course, I was the problem, not them, never them. I bit my tongue, having no interest in arguing with my grandmother. She was old, and her mind was made up. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. You should be ashamed. You have a good job, you have money, and your parents are going to lose the house. You're going to let that happen? Lose the house? I frowned. What do you mean? They're months behind on their mortgage? They never told you, she asked. No, I replied, realizing that they hadn't actually been worried about losing the house. If they were, they wouldn't have been spending money like fools. But now, they were genuinely in trouble, and they wanted me to fix it. I almost hung up. They had spent years treating me like an ATM, assuming I would always be there. Now, for the first time, they were facing real consequences, and they were scared. I took a deep breath. That's not my problem. My grandmother gasped as if I had slapped her. How can you say that? She asked. How can they do this? I shot back. How can they waste money and expect me to save them? How can they talk about me behind my back and laugh at me? There was silence, and then, in the smallest voice I had ever heard from her, she asked, What are you talking about? I realized she didn't know. They hadn't told her, they had gone crying to her, playing the victims, spinning some story about how I had suddenly turned my back on them. She had believed them because, why wouldn't she? They were her kids. They lied to her just like they had lied to me. I pulled up the email, stared at it for a second, and then forwarded it to her. She didn't call me back, but my parents did. The next day, my father's name popped up on my screen, and I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my mother called, and I ignored that too. Then the text started, What did you say to Grandma? What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you do that? I read them all without responding. About an hour later, another text came through from my grandmother. I had no idea. That was the moment I knew I had just ruined their entire game, and they weren't going to let me get away with it. The first time I left them hanging, they panicked. The second time, they got angry. Now, they were desperate. The next day, while I was at work, my phone started buzzing nonstop with back-to-back calls from my parents. I ignored them. Then my manager approached, looking confused. Hey, there's a woman on the phone for you. She says it's an emergency. I already knew who it was. I picked up the work line, and before I could even say hello, my mother started screaming. How dare you? I held the phone away from my ear. What exactly are you mad about? I asked, keeping my voice calm. You told Grandma. You humiliated us. I almost hung up. I didn't tell her anything. I just forwarded an email, your email, that was private. I rolled my eyes. So was my bank account. There was silence, and then her voice dropped to a fake whisper, the kind she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. Sweetheart, listen. We were just joking. We didn't mean anything by it. I could hear my father in the background muttering something, probably feeding her lines. Joking? I repeated. So when you said, as long as we keep up the act, we're set for life, that was just a joke? Yes, she replied. I almost felt bad for her, she sounded pathetic. But only almost. I exhaled slowly. I'm at work. Don't call me again. I hung up. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Later that night, I got home to find an unfamiliar car parked outside my building. The engine was off, but the silhouette inside was unmistakable, my mother. She had never come to my place uninvited before. I sat in my car, debating whether to drive off and pretend I didn't see her. But if I did, she would just come back, probably with my father next time, probably at some ungodly hour. I got out and walked over. I don't know what was said, but I knew they panicked because suddenly the texts started flooding in. I can't believe you'd do this to your own mother. You're ruining us. I hope you're happy. I ignored every single one. Then one final message came through from my father: "I hope you know you just destroyed this family." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. They had never been a real family to me, they had been leeches, and now, for the first time, they were about to feel what it was like to be on their own. 2 days after the police showed up at my parents' house, my grandmother called me again. This time, her voice wasn't scolding or guilt-tripping, she sounded tired. "I need to see you." I hesitated. "Why?" "Just come," she sighed. "Please." I owed my parents nothing, but my grandmother had believed their lies. She hadn't stolen from me, she hadn't treated me like an ATM. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived at her house, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded in front of her. Across from her, looking like a cornered animal, was my mother. I immediately tensed. "Why is she here?" I asked. "She has something to say," my grandmother replied. I turned to leave. "I don't need to hear it." "I didn't take all of it," my mother blurted. I stopped, slowly turning back. "Excuse me?" She swallowed hard. "I didn't take all of it. Your father did." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, so this is the plan now? Throw Dad under the bus?" She shook her head. "He didn't tell me he was going to do it. I didn't know until after." For the first time in my life, my mother looked scared of me, not because I was physically intimidating or yelling, but because she realized she had finally, actually lost me. I stared at her, having spent years bending over backward for these people, letting them take from me, manipulate me, and treat me like an idiot. And now here she was, scrambling to save herself. I tilted my head. "So what do you want me to do with that information?" Her lips trembled. "I thought you should know. You think I'll go easier on you because it was his idea?" She opened her mouth and closed it, then, with a deep breath, she whispered, "We were going to pay you back." I scoffed. "No, you weren't." "I swear, no, you weren't." I snapped. "You were never going to pay me back. You thought I'd let it go just like I always have, and now that the police are involved, you're trying to pin it on Dad." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to go to jail." I barked out a laugh. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from me." She started sobbing, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing, no guilt, no sympathy, nothing. I turned to my grandmother. "Is this why you called me here? So I could listen to her make excuses?" My grandmother sighed. "I called you here because you deserve to hear the truth. Your parents made mistakes." I laughed again. "Mistakes? They love you," she said firmly. They don't know how to show it." I exhaled sharply. "They don't love me, they love what I could give them." She didn't respond, and that told me everything I needed to know. I looked at my mother one last time. "You said I'd regret this." Her breath hitched. "Well," I continued, stepping toward the door, "I don't." I walked out. The fallout was immediate. My father tried to call me, probably to scream at me, maybe to beg, maybe both. I didn't answer. My mother sent me long texts, paragraphs about how she was sorry, how she never meant to hurt me, how she would never forgive herself. I left them on read. Then came the final blow: the bank reversed the transaction. Not because of the fraud claim, no, that was still being investigated, but because my parents had been stupid enough to transfer the money to their own account. After enough calls and proof, the bank flagged it and yanked it back. They lost everything overnight. The mortgage was still overdue, the loan payments were still looming, and now the money they thought they could get away with was gone. Then came the real explosion. I heard about it from my aunt. Apparently, after the money was taken back, my parents turned on each other. My mother blamed my father for taking the money I would have taken him in during recovery if needed, but not anymore. The next morning, I told my boss I needed to take a personal day, not to visit my father, but to finally do something I had been putting off. I drove to a local animal shelter. 3 hours later, I walked out with a scruffy 3-year-old mutt named Buster, who had been overlooked by everyone else. The shelter worker seemed shocked when I pointed to him. Really? Most people want the puppies or the purebreds. I shrugged. He needs a home. I have one. That night, with Buster curled up at my feet, I received another call from the hospital. This time, I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. My father wanted to see me, he had something important to tell me. I deleted it without calling back. The next day, my phone rang again. This time, it was my aunt. Your father's in the hospital. I know, I said. He's asking for you. I know that too, I replied. She sighed. He says he's sorry. For what specifically? I asked. For calling me an idiot? For stealing from me? For trying to guilt me when I stopped being his personal bank? He's dying, she said softly. That stopped me. The doctor said he was stable, but the heart attack was worse than they thought. There was significant damage. I sat down on my couch, and Buster immediately jumped up to sit beside me. I scratched behind his ears absently. I'm not asking you to forgive him, my aunt continued. Just hear what he has to say. He says he has something for you. Probably more bills, I muttered. Please, she said, for me. I'll be there too. My aunt had never been like my parents, she'd always been kind, always been fair. I sighed. Fine. When? Tomorrow at 2. I'll be there. I hung up, already regretting my decision. The next day, I walked into the hospital room to find my father looking small and gray against the white sheets. My aunt sat beside him, holding his hand. When he saw me, his eyes widened. You came, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stayed near the door. Aunt Linda asked me to. He nodded slowly, then motioned to the bedside table. Top drawer. My aunt reached over and pulled out an envelope, handing it to me. What's this? I asked, not touching it. Open it, my father said reluctantly. I took the envelope and looked inside. It contained a check. I pulled it out, expecting some token amount, some final manipulation. Instead, I saw a number that made me blink twice to make sure I was seeing it correctly. What is this? I asked again, my voice harder. Your money, he said. All of it, plus interest. I stared at the check, then back at him. Where did you get this? I sold the house. It finally went through last week. He coughed. Your mother didn't want to, but I made her sign. I didn't know what to say. The amount was more than what they'd stolen, more than what I'd lent them over the years. It was everything. Why now? I finally asked. Because I'm dying, he said simply. And I don't want to die knowing my son hates me. That's still about you, I pointed out. He nodded weakly. You're right. I've always been selfish, always thought about myself first. Your mother too. He coughed again. We never deserved you. I folded the check and put it back in the envelope. No, you didn't. I'm sorry, he said, tears welling in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I looked at him for a long moment, the man who had helped raise me, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had cheered at my high school graduation, who had also called me stupid behind my back and stolen from me when I stopped giving freely. I forgive you, I said finally, and I meant it not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to be free of the anger. He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. Thank you, he whispered. I nodded to my aunt and turned to leave. Will you come back? My father called after me. I paused in the doorway. I don't know, I answered honestly. And I didn't. My father died 3 days later. I didn't go back to see him again, but I did attend the funeral. My mother was there, looking lost and thin. She tried to approach me once, but I turned away. Hurt? I wanted to see you, she said. How did you find me? I asked, knowing I hadn't told any family members except my grandmother about the new house. Linda told me, she replied, my aunt. Of course. I sighed. What do you want? She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. I'd been in therapy, she said, for almost a year now. I didn't respond. I'd been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, she continued. It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but it helps me understand why I did it. I shifted uncomfortably. Okay. Part of my recovery is making amends, she said. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect us to have a relationship. I just wanted to tell you that I know what we did was wrong, all of it, and I'm truly sorry. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, the familiar patterns I'd grown up with, but all I saw was exhaustion and regret. You're right, I said finally. I don't forgive you, not yet, maybe not ever. But I appreciate you saying it. She nodded, seemingly accepting this. That's fair. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. This is for you. It's a record of every penny you ever gave us. Your father started it before he died, and I finished it. She held it out to me. I hesitated before taking it. Why? Because you deserve to know that we remember, she said simply, that we know what we took from you. I flipped through the notebook, dates, amounts, excuses they had used. It was all there, meticulously documented. I'd been rebuilding my life, she said. I got a job at a call center. It's not much, but it pays the bills. I'm renting a small apartment, living within my means for the first time in my life. Good for you, I said, and I meant it. I won't bother you again, she promised. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better, not for you, not to get you back in my life, but because it's what I should have been doing all along. She turned to leave, then stopped. Your house is nice. I'm glad you have a good life. I watched her walk to her car, an old sensible sedan, nothing like the luxury car she used to insist they needed. As she drove away, I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first seedling of closure. That night, I called my Aunt Linda for the first time in months. She came to see me, I said without preamble. I know, Linda replied. She's been planning it for weeks, kept chickening out. You gave her my address? Linda was quiet for a moment. I did. I'm sorry if that crossed a line, but she's really trying, you know. Is she? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. Yeah, she's not the same person. Losing your dad, losing you, losing everything, it broke something in her. But maybe it needed to be broken so she could rebuild herself properly. I thought about that. Maybe you don't have to let her back in your life, Linda assured me. No one expects that of you. Good, I said, because I'm not ready for that. I don't know if I'll ever be, I added. That's fair, she said. Just keep an open mind about the possibility that people can change, even if it takes losing everything first. After we hung up, I sat on my couch with Buster's head in my lap, thinking about change, about growth, about the complicated mess that was family. I didn't know if my mother had really changed or if this was just another manipulation. I didn't know if I'd ever want her in my life again, but for the first time, I realized I was open to the possibility of finding out on my terms, in my time. The next Sunday, my grandmother asked about my mother's visit. Of course, she knew they still talked occasionally. She seems different, I admitted. My grandmother nodded. People can surprise you sometimes, in terrible ways. She reached across the table and patted my hand. And sometimes in good ways too. We'll see, I said. That evening, I added my mother's number to my phone contacts. I didn't call her or text her, I wasn't ready for that. But it was a small acknowledgement that maybe someday I might be willing to hear what she had to say. For now, though, my life was good. I had my house, my dog, my job, and the family members who had.